18th century in architecture and in the other arts brought restraint, common sense and moderation. The architectural example was Palladio, the Renaissance architect, who developed a special villa style which was imitated in 18th century England. This is Colin Campbell's Mereworth Castle. But the most famous architectural achievement of English classicism was Burlington's Chiswick House. This is a contemporary drawing. And this is how the villa looks today, inside and outside. Other classicist buildings, which are all characterized by light, symmetry, logical structure. Classicism also witnessed the birth of town planning, urban planning. The best example is Bath, which was greatly developed as a fashionable resort place. The Royal Crescent. Landscape shows the mixture of the new style and the old. The old style is exemplified by a classicist railing, and in the background the ruins show the new sensibility. The greatest painter of English classicism was Hogarth. He started with the so-called conversational pieces, which show people, very often family, in their natural setting. This is the Children of the Apothecary Graham. This is another kind of setting, the Lord George Graham, military naval commander on his ship in his cabin. Hogarth became famous for his series. This is his first famous series, the Election Campaign. An uncompromising faithfulness to truth characterizes the series The Harlot's Progress. The harlot's progress is like fortune's wheel, from prosperity to fall and desperation. A scene from the other famous series, The Rake's Progress. And the third famous series, Marriage à la Mode, which also showed the realities of British life in the early 18th century. This is a highly satirical scene called Oh, the Roast Beef of England, which ironizes on the differences between France and England. Hogarth also liked to paint theatre scenes. This is a scene from Gay's Beggar's Opera in Highgate Prison. Let's return to Hogarth's portraits, because he was also an ingenious portrait painter. This is Captain Coram, another naval captain. A group portrait of Hogarth's servants, very much in the manner of the Dutch realists like Rembrandt. And perhaps his finest portrait, which points even to Impressionism, the Shrimp Girl. Sir Joshua Reynolds painted in a completely different style. He follows the great Baroque masters and turned their style into a classicized dignity, what he called the sublime. He was primarily a portrait painter, but placed his portraits in, as he called, historical setting. This is his self-portrait with the bust of Michelangelo. Again, lords and earls, just like on the portraits of Kneller, or Sir Peter Lely. He also liked to paint group portraits, but not servants, as Hogarth, rather royal or ducal families. One of his most famous portraits is Commodore Capel, which was challenged by contemporary English painter Ramsay in a similar posture of a Scottish lord. In his later career, Reynolds started painting softer family portraits, usually aristocratic women with their children. One of his finest portraits is Edna O'Brien, a celebrated beauty of the age. These last paintings already points to the next generation, who painted in a softer style, and their style is called the Age of Sensibility. Another fashionable genre of the period was sporting pictures. The greatest master of these was George Stubbs, who mostly painted horses, but sometimes also in an environment populated by people as well. The greatest painter of this new sensibility was Thomas Gainsborough. He still followed Classicism, but more and more moved in the direction of Romanticism. His early landscape portrait of Mr. and Mrs. Andrews is very, very beautiful, the couple very harmoniously and in a balanced way placed in nature. Later on he moved to Bath and became a fashionable portrait painter of the aristocracy. The portraits of this period are more dignified, following the style of Van Dyck. The Countess Mary Howe, which is said to be the best portrait of the century in all over Europe. The Honourable Mrs. Graham, a much stiffer, more dignified, somewhat Barockish portrait. In his last years, Gainsborough's portraiture became somewhat strange. His men became effeminate, unlike the robust British males of Reynolds, and he also painted aerial, somewhat strange couples in an almost Rococo style. This painting is entitled The Evening Walk. One of the most modern features of Gainsborough's painting is his landscapes. In his last period, he managed to paint landscapes which point towards Romanticism and can be considered as the forerunners of the genuine landscapes of Constable. This is the Market Cart, a celebrated landscape, or another one from the same period. His very last pictures again show a new genre, what he called the fancy pictures. On these fancy pictures he painted children, innocent children, and animals. like this girl with pigs. While in painting, sentimentalism and sensibility became the dominant discourse by the 1790s, in sculpture and in architecture, the classical spirit remained. A building by William Wilkins still echoes the Greek temple style. This is a famous museum established by Sir John Soane, full of antiquities. The arrangement of the busts and other porcelains and marbles again reflect the classical spirit. The frieze on the Hyde Park Corner monument recalls the Elgin marbles. Peter Shoemaker's statue of Shakespeare reminds us of an 18th century gallant rather than a 16th century Renaissance man. Thomas Banks's The Death of Germanicus is pure classicism.
As the classical style exhausted itself towards the end of the 18th century, landscapes changed from harmony and formal beauty to agitated, powerful visions of nature. Similarly, the formal Italian and French gardens were also transformed into free and irregular English parks. The pioneer of neo-Gothic revival architecture was the eccentric aristocrat Horace Walpole, who turned his classical villa, Strawberry Hill, into a fanciful, romantic castle. Here we see the revival of medieval towers, fake fan vaulting, and a lot of pointed arches. On this sketch, Walpole sits in front of his Gothic window, still in classical dresses and wig, nevertheless boldly looking into the future.